going tonight.
That was great.
Recording in progress.
You're good.
Welcome everybody to the regularly stated meeting of the Yarmouth Conservation Commission. Today is the meeting for Thursday, June 5th, 2025. We are taking a few things out of order, and before we get into the actual agenda, I just want to point out that we currently, tonight, we have one Commissioner, David Bernstein, who is calling in from Zoom land. So we will be having to do all roll call votes. So for the rest of the commission. With that said, our first item on the agenda is a project update for Julie Bussin O'Neill for Cape Cod Hospital and Cape Cod Conservation District update on the Bayview Bog Restoration Project.
Mr. Chairman, let me just speak for just a few moments and turn it over to Julie. As you know, I serve on the Select Board, but the other hat that I wear regularly these days is I'm Chairman of the Cape Cod Conservation District, and we're very excited about being here tonight to give you an update on the project that we've been working on for quite some time. I think most of you are familiar with the site, but we are active partners with Cape Cod Healthcare, with the Massachusetts Division of Ecological Restoration. We're all working together to promote the restoration of this abandoned and somewhat degraded resource here in the town of Yarmouth. And this has been designated as a high priority project by the state, by the Massachusetts Division of Ecological Restoration, and we work very closely with them. They've been providing a substantial amount of the funding for this project, and we're thrilled with their support and their involvement. Just as an aside, the district itself, this is part of the work that we do here on Cape Cod. The Cape Cod Conservation District is involved in land conservation and ecological restoration and has been in this business since 1947 when we were created by the state legislature. My job as the chairman of the board is to raise federal funds to do projects all throughout the Cape. Over the past 10 years, we've raised well over $80 million to do projects just like this. So this is a project we're very excited about, and we very much appreciate having the opportunity to be with you here tonight. So thank you. Julie?
Thank you. My name's Julie Busa. I'm an ecologist and professional wetland scientist with Bussin O'Neill, working with the partners to design this restoration. So the project site is immediately adjacent to the hospital. It's right at the border of Hyannis and Yarmouth, but in the Yarmouth side. It is approximately 90 acres of former cranberry bog, and as you can see from the parcel mapping, it is somewhat unique in that it's embedded in a highly developed neighborhood, and so we're really interested in thinking about this as a community project as well as a restoration project. A little bit of background on the hydrology. The site has been extremely modified over the years, so if you look at a historic USGS map, you can see that Lewis Bay has a tidal connection, a tidal creek that enters the site, but historically there was no connection to the north side of Route 28, no flow across there. And in the past, a dam was built by Makepeace for flows that would have drained in this direction to create a reservoir here, and a ditch was dug under Route 28 to be able to provide irrigation water to those bogs. So just one instance of the extent of hydrologic modification on the site that we're looking to undo and restore. So you can also get a sense of the extensive network of ditches that were created across the site. Originally, there were a number of different bog cells. You can see them outlined in green. Those would have been divided by, and most of them still are, divided by berms like this one with water control structures in them to allow them to move water through the different cells for agricultural purposes. This particular berm that you're seeing in the image is the ultimate outlet from the site. The tidal creek comes up to this point. We see tidal action to this point, but this is about a 4.5 foot drop, and so the tides are no longer able to get into the site as they would have historically. These are other images from within the site. Deep within the site, there are a few pockets that have restored to a more natural-looking wetland system, but most of the site you still see the very linear, defined ditches, and those are creating drier platforms across the bogs, so water is being quickly moved through the site via these ditches rather than being allowed to spread out across these wetlands. And that's why we're seeing so much tree growth and upland system developing on those former bog platforms. We also look at the underlying soils for evidence of where the wetlands would have been, and so this is mapping of peat deposits that are underneath the soils, and you can see that in this northeast corner we have some of the deepest peat deposits that we've found on the site. And interestingly, this area you can kind of see under the mapping is where it's turned into white pine forest at this point. So this is typical of what we see in cranberry bogs, that even though the underlying conditions were there for wetlands and they were built from wetlands, left alone without intervention to undo the modifications, they often trend towards upland, and so we lose that wetland functionality. And this is the outlet of the site. So these are two town-owned crossings under Park Avenue. The larger one here is what connects the Tidal Creek up into the site. So this is looking towards Lewis Bay, standing on Park Avenue. And so that is the Tidal Creek. And these two culverts are not currently involved in the project that the district and the hospital are putting together, but we are thinking about them as part of a larger restoration vision, so that the design that we're creating assumes that in the future these could be enlarged to further add to the restoration potential. Thanks, Brittany. So why restore retired cranberry bogs? Some of you are probably familiar with some of these ideas from other projects that are happening in the area. Next slide. I think you're probably all aware that the cranberry industry has been in distinct decline in Massachusetts, so we're seeing a lot of bogs retired. This one has been retired for several decades at this point. Next slide. And as I had hinted, without intervention, we're not likely to see that site restore back to wetlands on its own. One of the pieces of that I haven't mentioned yet is the layers of sand that are placed on the bog surfaces over the course of agricultural production. So typically on a former cranberry bog, you have 18 inches or more of sand on top of those buried wetland soils, and that further contributes to the development of upland vegetation and upland systems there. That's in addition to the alterations of hydrology and simplification of the landscape. So this is an image from a recently completed bog restoration on Nantucket at Windswept Bogs, and I like to always make sure to clue people into the fact that there is a stage in this process that looks very messy. It can be surprising. So this is a more recently retired bog, so you don't see the trees on it, but you've got the before on the left, kind of looks like an upland meadow. During a project like this, there will be a short period of time where it looks like a bomb has gone off. There's a lot of exposed soil. That's part of the process. That's part of exposing the native underlying wetland soils. And then that picture in the top right was taken in the middle of March when construction was completed, and the bottom right is late September. But even by June, it would have looked very similar to that bottom picture. So it's only about a few months that it takes for it to green up. And we did not plant anything here. That's all native vegetation that has come back from the buried seed bank that's in the soil that's been underlying that agricultural activity for decades. So we're doing this through a process known as process-based restoration, and the intent there is that we are undoing the human alterations to restore ecological functions and then allowing the system to kind of continue to adapt and find its own course over time. The idea being that it should be self-sustaining in the long term and not require significant future interventions. We want it to be a healthy, self-sustaining ecosystem. We're also thinking in this case, because of proximity to the coast, because of that Tidal Creek connection, about the fact that over the next several decades we're going to see the tides coming further into that site with sea level rise. And so we're looking to sort of find the balance between restoring for freshwater wetlands today and tomorrow, but allowing for that site to be healthy enough to adapt and modify and invite salt marsh to migrate into the site in the long term. These are a couple more images of what that process looks like. On the left, that was formerly a approximately 4 foot wide by 4 foot deep, very straight ditch. So we're making that broader and more shallow to allow water to spread out, slow down, have more residence time on the site. Similarly, on the right-hand side, this technique is called microtopography. Basically, excavators scoop up and turn over the material so that you're breaking up the mat of cranberry vegetation. In this case, we'd be clearing some of the trees that have grown up in those upland species and re-engaging groundwater, re-engaging and bringing to the surface some of that buried peat, and also just creating variation in the topography to more closely resemble a natural wetland system as opposed to a very smooth agricultural surface. There are significant co-benefits in addition to restoration of freshwater wetlands that we're looking to achieve through this project. I already mentioned the potential for salt marsh migration. We're also thinking very seriously here, because of the proximity to and connection with the hospital, the way that this can function as a therapeutic landscape and an extension of the hospital's healing mission, and then also how we can offer passive recreation for the community through a trail system. And so we held a visioning workshop back in December. We met with hospital officials. We met with neighborhood folks through the Hyannis Park Civic Association. We met with a number of town officials and talked a lot about what the site is now and what it could be in the future, and landed on this tagline of healing the landscape and healing the community, kind of that joint vision of the ecological restoration aspects in their own right and the way that it can be a benefit to the community and the hospital. Some of the big concerns that came up through that process were invasive species. Much of the site is currently dominated by invasive plants. I'll talk more about that in a moment. I already mentioned the idea of balancing freshwater wetlands tomorrow and future sea level rise adaptations. And then there are additional concerns with access related to pedestrian vehicle conflict on the adjacent street, the perception of safety in the site because of the dense vegetation and the site being rather closed in. It doesn't necessarily feel very safe for people. We've heard that about people who are trying to use the trail now. There are homeless encampments in the site, have been historically, and we also talked about long-term maintenance and also parking and sort of how people might access the site in the future and what that could mean. So this is again the site today, just rotated so that Route 28 and the north are on the left, Lewis Bay is on the right, and then the next slide will show you the concept vision that came out of our visioning process. So this is that connection or would-be connection to the tidal creek. So we would be removing that berm and water control structure to allow the tidal influence to come back into the site. In the short term, it would only come in a little bit, but we would be sort of extending that tidal creek connection so that with sea level rise, as the tides are coming up, they'll be able to come further into the site and drain back out. And all of the light green that you're seeing elsewhere is freshwater wetland, so sort of a hummock hollow type wetland surface. There are 3 existing ponds. Right now they have very hard edges. We're looking to leave those in place, but just do some enhancement planting and try to soften those edges a bit, make them feel more naturally connected to the adjacent habitat. Can you go back? This is currently upland, so we're looking to create a hydrologic connection here to allow some relief for this area to drain this direction, providing some relief for this undersized culvert on Park Avenue, but also just make the whole system better connected. And then this is that pine area that has deep peat deposits, so looking to do some excavation there to really allow that to develop back into a deep marsh type environment. And then the existing farm road that runs along the outside becomes the primary basis for the trail network. This would be a boardwalk to allow for a shorter loop, but also allow people to really get out into and experience the sort of center of the site and really get out into those wetlands. And then this area I'll speak more about, but this is a little bit more highly programmed therapeutic landscape area. So these are some images that we've created of what that could look like. So this is sort of, if you were above the hospital looking out towards the bay, this is that more highly programmed area I'll speak about that's on an upland knoll. The trail kind of runs along the whole outside, and you can see now that there's sort of these expansive views across the restored wetlands. And then if you could just scroll through, there's several images that sort of show that trail network. The boardwalk would be supported on helical piers and above the water level that we would expect during larger storm events where the bogs would get wetter and then drain back out. Additional views and sort of all of these little pockets of overlooks or areas for benches, places for people to kind of cluster with a few people and just enjoy the experience. We did hear from neighbors about concerns not wanting to have it feel like there's people right in their backyard. So this is demonstrating that the bogs are at a significantly lower elevation than most of the adjoining neighborhoods, and we would leave this vegetated buffer intact. So you'd have both the elevation and the vegetation working to provide that buffer between the site and adjacent homes. And then this is that more programmed therapeutic landscape. So the hospital front door is essentially here. This is an elevated crosswalk area leading into sort of a welcome pavilion. This would be, sort of brick pavers, an area with some small tables and things. And then a bit deeper into the site, we'd have this area on the upland that has sort of these different terraces with sort of little pockets of places with benches. You'll see this again in the next couple slides. The idea being that, if you're a surgeon and you've just got out of a difficult operation and you need to step away, there's a spot where you can go for that. If you are there with family and you just got some bad news, there's places where lots of little pockets here where small groups or individuals can find some respite and reflect and have this immersion into the wetlands as part of the healing mission and an extension of the services that the hospital is offering. And these are just images to demonstrate what that area looks like. So in terms of where we are now and next steps, I mentioned the extent of invasives on the site. The Cape Cod Conservation District has funding through the Division of Ecological Restoration to do extensive pre-construction invasive management. And they're looking to, or we're looking to do basically 6 rounds of treatment by the end of next June to hit these invasives hard before we ever put shovels in the ground and really start to get a handle on control of those invasives. And then obviously there would be additional invasives management during construction and post-construction, but our goal is to get as much under control as we can before we start soil disturbance. And there is actually an NOI that's been submitted that will be specific to that invasives treatment. We're also doing a turtle survey that will be completed by the end of this month. So there's no endangered species mapped on the property now, but there are anecdotal reports of box turtle. And so we're wanting to be proactive in understanding the habitat that's out there, see if we can identify any individuals, and then think about how turtle habitat can actually be baked into the restoration design so that we're adding that potential for supporting rare species as well. So we're in the design and permitting process now. We anticipate submitting an NOI for the entire project later this summer or in the fall. And we're looking at submitting that as a full ecological restoration under the tidal restoration type, because we'll be removing that barrier to the tidal creek being able to flow into the site, and also thinking about submitting under the rare species habitat restoration type because of that intent to be able to support rare species on the site. The other piece that we're doing right now is additional outreach, and so at the end of June, on the 21st, about 2 weeks from now, we're having a neighborhood open house where we've sent out postcards that I think all of you have one in front of you, inviting folks just to stop by and chat for a few minutes. We'll have all of these graphic images up, and we'll be there to answer questions about the project. And and just chat more with people and give them more information. There's also a link on each of those postcards to the project website, which will be further updated with a lot of this information very soon. And so we're happy to answer any questions, but really we just wanted to kind of give you a status update on where things are.
Okay, thank you. Questions from any commissioners? Di?
Well, I'd like to thank the district and the other partners that are involved. That takes a lot of time, long effort, and I hope we can have eyes on another one after this.
We have eyes on a lot of other ones after this.
That's all I've got. I think it's a great project, and I appreciate you coming.
Yeah, I think it's a wonderful project, and it seems to be thematic in terms of things like the Riverwalk Park and other places that just, the focus being on opening up these places, making them accessible to the public, and to kind of celebrate the ecosystem that does exist that's so important to us, obviously, here. And I'm glad there are eyes on other boxes. I have a couple of ideas about where to put those eyes. Thank you.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, it's a nice project. I appreciate the boardwalk going through. As one who was here, was it 25 years ago when NRCS first did this, right? At the time, I wanted an observation platform out in the middle. So anything that gets you out into the resource is good for me. So anyhow, I think it's a great project.
If I can just add, Mr. Chairman, back when we were working on this 25 years ago, there was a desire really to bring everything to a quick conclusion. But the district never lost interest in a broader scale restoration. I just want to let everybody know that. We felt that given the situation at the time and some of the tensions involving some of the parties, it was best to just do what we could and then revisit it later. So later is here, it's now, and I think Fussin O'Neill has done a great job for the community and for the district and all the partners, and we're very pleased with the response from this board.
Thank you very much. Any last questions? David, you good? Don't see him. Oh, yeah, okay, he's giving us a thumbs up. He's blocked by the ribbon there. All right, thank you very much.
Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry, I barely have a voice, so.
That's okay, just give us a thumbs up, David, when you want to say yes, thumbs up, no, give us a thumbs down.
Thanks.
Okay.
All right, so we are, is there a representative for Two Buttercup?
Wayne,
Is it Wayne?
he's in the hallway.
He's out in the hall?
We're jumping around.
All right, so we're taking things just out of order here. We have, let's see, this is for SE 83-2485, Alexander Neimanoff, 2 Buttercup Lane, proposed dock and land subject coastal storm flowage, coastal bank, salt marsh, land containing shellfish, and land under the ocean. Welcome, Wayne. Attorney Wall, how are you? Long time no see. I thought you were going to be here on a completely different matter, so.
Yeah.
So anyhow,
Mr. Hoops and I had a site visit today in Barnstable, and I got a bunch of sun because of that. Any event. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the record, my name is Brian. My name is Brian Wall, and I'm an attorney with an office in Sandwich, and I'm here tonight representing the applicant, 2 Buttercup Realty Trust, which is the owner of property at 2 Buttercup Lane in Yarmouth. And with me to present this application, to my left is Wayne Tavares of Wet Tech Environmental from Sagamore Beach, and to my right is Brad Holmes from Environmental Consulting and Restoration. What I'm going to do is give a brief overview, and also I want to address what we believe to be the standard of review that should be applied by the Commission on this project. And then Mr. Tavares will talk about the design briefly, and then Mr. Holmes will talk about compliance with the regulations. So beginning with the overview, the applicant purchased this property a little bit more than a year ago in 2024. At the time of the purchase, the property had a dwelling on it that had been constructed according to assessing records in 1945. It also had a dock with a float. Under a separate order of conditions, this commission might recall that the applicant obtained permission to take down the house and to build a new house, and that project is underway and nearly complete. The applicant also seeks to do the same with the dock, which is to take down the old dock and to construct a new dock. This commission might recall that the applicant previously applied for an 80-foot dock, but the Waterways Committee recommended against that dock because the area at issue is used by shell fishermen, and the length of the dock was opposed by shell fishermen. It said that it would impact their ability to maneuver and access that particular area. So we withdrew that notice of intent from this commission, and we redesigned, and we're back here tonight with a proposal for a 42-foot dock. And the reason for that is we had 3 more hearings before the Waterways Committee trying to work with them to get to a length that would be acceptable to them and to the shell fishermen that attend those hearings. And ultimately, about 2 weeks ago, the Waterways Committee voted to issue an advisory opinion to the Commission advising that it has no concerns whatsoever with the length of the proposed dock, but it does have some concerns with regard to shellfish, which we're going to talk about tonight. And the committee did not vote to make a recommendation that this commission either approve or deny the dock. They simply provided the advice regarding their concerns. I'd like to talk about the standard of review just for a minute. The dock that exists at the property was constructed before the Wetlands Protection Act and before the town's Wetlands Protection Bylaw. And I've submitted a letter as part of the record explaining this in more detail. The evidence that we've submitted to support this contention is, number 1, a letter from owners of a budding property at 3 Buttercup Lane confirming that they've owned the property since 1961, and that the entire time that they've owned the property, there's been a dock in existence at 2 Buttercup. We also obtained a letter from the person who sold the property to the applicant, and that letter says that that person bought the property in 1983, and at the time that he bought the property, there was a dock in existence, and that he maintained and used the dock the entire time that he owned the property until he sold it to the applicant in 2024. The prior owner also provided some evidence regarding what the dimensions of the dock were. It consisted of a 24-foot pier with a 12-foot ramp, which extended down to a 20-foot float. And he kept a Boston whaler on the float for the 38 years that he owned the property. In addition to those 2 letters, we submitted an aerial photo from 2016 showing the dock with a configuration consistent with that as described by the prior owner. We had difficulty finding aerial photos older than that, but I would suggest to you that the fact that we don't have an older photo is not evidence that there wasn't a dock. It's just that this particular dock consisted largely of the ramp and the float, and the tree canopy kind of covers where the dock protrudes out, and also in the wintertime the dock and the ramp and the float come out, so the aerial photo wouldn't catch that. Lastly, I would also note for your attention that the Yarmouth assessing records refer to the property as having a dock, so it's taxed on the basis that it has a dock. We proposed, tonight you'll hear from Mr. Tavares, a dock that strictly complies with all of your regulations except for one. The one that we don't comply with is 3.0111, and that's the regulation that requires 3 feet of depth at the terminus end of the pier at mean low water. The proposed dock has 29 inches at the end, not 36. But it's our contention tonight that the applicant's position is that even though we don't strictly comply with 3.0111, the project still satisfies your regulations because this project involves rebuilding a pre-existing dock, and because we have satisfied the regulations to the greatest extent practicable. And why do I use that phrase? It comes from your regulations. And I have a little chart. Let me just stick that in the front. If you look at Section 22, of your regulations, it talks about pre-existing structures, and if you have a structure that was constructed prior to the bylaw or prior to the Wetlands Protection Act, you have to come before the commission attempting to comply with the regulations to the greatest extent practicable. And we comply with all of your regulations except for the depth requirement. And our contention is that we have complied with that to the greatest extent possible because we had 10 hearings before the Waterways Committee. And we first started off with a 160-foot pier, which is beyond your 80-foot requirement, but that got to the depth. That was not received very well, obviously. And so we came back and we went for an 80-foot dock, which is the maximum allowed by your regulations. But the shell fishermen that appeared at the Waterways Committee found that to be objectionable because there is a shellfish bed there. And you'll hear from Mr. Tavares and Mr. Holmes. It begins about 45 to 50 feet from shore. So there's actually no shellfish where the dock is proposed, but the shellfish are beyond that point. And the shell fishermen used that area and found the length objectionable. So we essentially went through all these hearings, and after that entire laborious 10-hearing process, we ended up at 42 feet. And so because that's what the Waterways Committee accepted, our contention is that's the greatest extent we're going to be allowed to extend into the water, and that gets us to the 29 inches, not the 36. And again, your regulations recognize pre-existing docks, and to use not greater extent practicable, but just kind of simpler language, we have to try as hard as we can to meet your regulations. And if you find that we have, you can approve this dock under your regulations. Having said that, I'm certainly available for questions, but I'd like to turn it over to Mr. Tavares to just walk through the pier design, and then Mr. Holmes will walk through the regulations.
Good evening. Again, my name is Wayne Tavares. I'm from Wet Tech Land Design. I'm the original designer of the dock, and some of you were here, I believe, in January when we presented it for 2 meetings, and then on the 3rd meeting, we withdrew. The dock at that time was 80 feet long, and it was in the second rendition of a Waterways appearance. So Waterways was very helpful, although it did take a while, 10 meetings to get through. A lot of things were done. The size of the piles were not in question. The spacing of the piles were not in question. None of this was in question. We had public access. We had the proper 1.5 feet to the bottom of the pier. In fact, I sloped it a little bit to go out. One of the things that Waterways did suggest is not to have a float, not to have a ramp. Now, of the 7 lots adjacent to this on Buttercup Way, most of them have been built out with docks and so forth. The one immediately adjacent is the proper distance away. It's 118 feet. They require a 50-foot minimum, and we're 118 feet from that. That particular dock has a float, has a ramp. It was ordained or approved some years ago, so the rules were different. But nonetheless, it reaches the same depth, 27 inches at low tide. So it is the same. It is longer than ours. It's 46 to 48 feet long. We have improved our dock in the sense that we've made the entire structure, the entire 42 feet, elevated. It's fixed and it's elevated. There is no ramp. There is no float. And that's through the suggestions of the Waterways Committee. So we have slides that allow a boat to be tied at the very end of the dock and slide up and down with the tide. It's about a 3.5-foot tide that is there. We're using slides, and we're forced to use ladders, of course, to reach the boats. So we have met all the conditions that we have set forward, and since I was here in the beginning, I remember the shellfish issue as being fairly substantial, and we had the subjective opinion of shell fishermen who came over at the meetings, and they're just opposed to having another dock. And then our consultant who did the shellfish report has the shellfish beyond, well beyond, at 60 feet. From shore, where the first shellfish show up. So we're at 42 feet, and the town bylaws allow for another 5 feet buffer zone surrounding the dock. So if we're at 42 feet and adding 5, we're at 47 feet. So in discussion with our consultant, he took the 40 feet he started at the salt marsh end. Salt marsh scarf, so to speak, is 20 feet from mean high water. So his 40 feet is equal to our 60 feet, because we started at mean high water, which was an issue in a prior meeting with waterways. So we have met all the constructive bylaws as far as sunlight penetration, as far as the height above the dock, as far as the spacing between the piles, the size of the piles, the type of wood used, the type of preservative that is used that's appropriate. And we have redesigned the dock a number of times under the supervision of waterways. So we feel very compliant. Also, it should be shown that on the original plan, and I think the attorney spoke one thing wrong in the beginning, was that the lot was bought back in 2020 rather than 2024. So we've been at a number of issues. I have represented the owner in a number of cases, including the rebuilding of the house, including zoning bylaw changes that were required in order to get the house built, including conservation approval twice because of other issues of coverage. So we've gone through this lot pretty successfully. The owner has just replanted the above portion of the lot to make it come into conformance. We've had some feedback from Brittany as far as how that made out. So we're at our last issue. And I looked at the old plan that was used for the very original. You're probably wondering why I'm mentioning that. The original plan shows the dock in its place. It's there now. It's been damaged by ice, but it also shows the float that existed on the site, and that's no longer found. So those elements were there in 2021 when the surveyor did this. So it's further proof that a dock did exist in that situation. So with that, I'm dealing with any questions you might have about the construction of this dock. This has been reviewed by both the surveyor, a professional land surveyor, and also stamped by a professional engineer. I designed these because I used to build them in the old days. I understand the construction, and the PE has given me credit as far as what has been done. He has stamped these a number of times for both waterways and for yourselves. So this is a very well-designed and well thought out and also well regulated by your boards, this particular dock. So that's the construction portion. Any questions you have in that respect, please ask me, and then I'll turn it over for performance standards and so forth to Brad Holmes.
Thank you, members of the commission. Brad Holmes with ECR. Happy to assist on this project. We put together a performance standards analysis. I won't go into each detail unless you would like that, but what we've gone through is to look at the resource areas on the lot and how the work affects those resource areas and complies with the resource areas, and analyze those per the state and local and the DEP guidance for docks. So when you look at the plan and you're coming down the slope to the pier, there are many resource areas that are under the protection of the Conservation Commission. You have a lot of them on this property. But when you come down, starting at the coastal bank, you have coastal bank to coastal beach to salt marsh to land containing shellfish to land under the ocean. So we have several resource areas that we're looking at getting a permit to work in. As I said, each one of those resource areas has a different performance standards. So as you come down the coastal bank, what's proposed is the coastal bank walkover structure. That's a elevated wooden stairway with 4x4 posts. Typical activity that's a permittable activity for work on a coastal bank. When we're looking at the performance standards for coastal bank, most of the performance standards are for the concern of armoring. Would there be a revetment proposed, or are you going to destabilize the coastal bank? That activity doesn't propose armoring and doesn't propose destabilizing the bank, and actually as part of another permit, I believe there's some mitigation activities on the bank. The other activity, the other resource areas as you come down is we hit from the toe of the coastal bank, we hit the coastal beach. Similar to the coastal bank, one of the concerns of the performance standards is, are we armoring the coastal beach? Are we preventing the beach from migrating? And the answer is no. The piles do not adversely affect the coastal beach. We have another resource area we're merging over would be the salt marsh. There's a narrow band of salt marsh just between the coastal bank. Between the coastal beach and land under the ocean. The design is able to span over that salt marsh, and one of the performance standards is that we don't alter the salt marsh, but we don't have a negative shading impact that may result from a pier. And as Wayne has designed the structure using the through-flow decking, that maximizes the sunlight penetration. And also we're in a north-south orientation, so as the sun rises in the east and sets in the west, we have a lot of sunlight penetrating under the structure. The other resource, as we're moving further from the salt marsh into the tidal flat and towards land under the ocean, is land containing shellfish. That's a resource area that is of concern of the Commission and was a concern of the Waterways Committee. John Lowell performed a shellfish survey that's part of the application. He documented shellfish in his report beyond the pier, and his surveys, as any shellfish survey would do their work at low tide. You wouldn't perform a shellfish survey at high tide. You perform a shellfish survey at low tide and measuring your distances out. And he encountered shellfish somewhere in that 50-foot range from mean low water, which we're well landward of that. We're well interior of that area. We did receive a letter from the Division of Marine Fisheries. Their comments weren't oppositional, in my opinion. They had some recommendations that could certainly be included as special conditions into the order of conditions. Another thing that the applicant would be very agreeable towards shellfish is your regulations do talk about moving shellfish, would have to be coordinated with the shellfish warden. We would be happy as a special condition that any shellfish, if there were any within that area, could be relocated prior to construction. We'd be happy to accommodate that, and that could be a special condition. But as I said, our shellfish survey revealed a lack of shellfish within that area. When you look, those are mainly the performance. I missed one. There are a lot. Land under the ocean. One of the last resource area that we're in is land under the ocean, and the performance standards for land under the ocean is really, if we're going to alter the topography, or we're going to change the elevations, and that kind of pertains more towards dredging. We're not proposing any dredging associated with this project. The state performance standards are very similar to the Yarmouth performance standards, although the Yarmouth performance standards also has a lengthy section on dock and pier guidance. And we've gone through each one of those standards for dock and pier guidance, which is different, or which is not different, which is in addition to the state. We've analyzed that, and Brian did mention that we are in compliance with all those standards except the 3-foot depth, but our position is that this isn't a new dock, so if this was a new dock, we'd have to meet that depth. This is a reconstruction of a dock, so we're held to the maximum extent practicable. One of the last items that is included in our analysis is how does the project comply with DEP's guidance for small docks and piers, and we're in exceedance of those requirements. We're above the height to width ratio. As I said, we have the graded decking. We have the passage for access along the mean high water. We've gone through each one of those standards to show that we're in compliance with DEP guidance. So that's an overview of a broad brush of, 50 6, 8 pages of analyses that we've included into the notice. But that hits the main points and can certainly continue from there. So I'll, unless Brian, if I'm missing anything, or Wayne, I'll bring it back to the commission.
Thanks, Brad. Questions from the commission?
Yeah, I'll start. You mentioned land containing shellfish, but I'm not seeing that on the plans. Is anyone else seeing that on the plans?
Well,
I just...
it's taken that basically from mean high water seaward would be land containing shellfish as a resource area.
Okay.
So, when you look at the definition of land containing shellfish, I think it starts at mean high water and extends into land under the ocean. So that's, as far as delineating the limit of it, we're certainly, as soon as we go into the intertidal area and beyond, we're in land containing shellfish as a resource area.
Okay.
As far as what we found for shellfish, the actual location of species within the land containing shellfish is documented in the report, which is seaward of the dock.
Okay, but the potential for shellfish could occur all the way up to the mean...
For sure. The whole area would be habitat for land containing shellfish.
Okay.
As soon as as soon as you get into the intertidal area.
Okay. And then I also, Brian, you had mentioned that the historic dock, or whatever you want to call it, was a 20-foot dock and a 20-foot float. So the one that you're proposing is still longer than what had originally been there.
Right, exactly. In the letter from, I think, Mr. Cameron, who was the person who owned the property from 83 until 2020, I did misspeak because there was an inter-family transfer in 2024. My clients owned it since 2020. The person that owned it before said that it was a 24-foot pier with a 12-foot ramp down to a 20-foot float. So that's what was there before. But your regulations don't require that you put back exactly what was there before. In fact, you require that you do the best possible to comply with the current regulations. So it's not like a zoning thing where you're limited to the footprint. What your regulations say is if you have a pre-existing dock, try to comply with our new regulations as best as possible. And that's our contention, that we've done that because we comply with everything except the depth, and we're almost at the depth, and we're at the 42 feet for the reasons that we said. We had all those hearings at Waterways, and that's where we ended up with what they would accept. And since that's what they would accept, we're making the contention here that that's the greatest extent practicable.
Could you tell me the date of that, when they went out and identified the location of the shellfish?
Did bring it. It was,
I think it was August.
Survey date was May 31st, 2004.
I'm sorry, what did you...
May 31st, 2024.
And then, when was the seeding?
It hasn't been seeded that I know of.
Yes, it was seeded in 2024. They didn't give the month. The Waterways Committee said 2024.
So I'd like to know what area was seeded and how...
When you said seeded, I thought it was in reference to what we have talked to the Natural Resources Director, and we're open to shellfish seeding, on our behalf to contribute to the fund. That's what I thought you were referencing, seeding, but I wasn't aware, I'm not aware on a town seeding or beyond that. We'd have to do some more investigation.
There's not enough information, Brittany, in the minutes, I don't think, of that.
I don't believe so. We can always follow up and ask with them.
I don't know if this helps answer the question too, but when we were at the Waterways, it was very clear that the area offshore is an actively used shellfish bed.
Is.
It is, yes, it is. And we can see that. There were numerous shellfish personnel, shellfishermen and women that came to the hearings and told us that they fished that area. And their primary concern, I think, and I don't want to misrepresent anything, was with the length, because it's shallow there, and they walk around in that shellfish bed, and that's why they wanted the pier brought back. Our survey, we don't know when it was done in relation to the seeding that you're bringing up. Our evidence is that it's not impacting any shellfish, but when we were here before with the 80-foot pier, it was impacting shellfish because our survey showed that, and we had offered mitigation, and even though we don't think this is impacting shellfish, we'd be happy to reoffer that mitigation. We'd be very pleased to do that.
That's all I have for the moment.
Anybody else?
Mr. Chairman?
I have something too.
Okay, so I'll go to David first and then back to Paul. David, go ahead.
Sorry, Paul. I just have a question about the 27 or whatever inches it was versus the 36. Where does that begin, and where does it end on this cross-section?
So the site plan shows 20 inches at mean low water at the end of the pier,
Okay.
whereas our regulations require 36 inches at the end of the pier whether or not a float exists or is proposed.
Okay, I see it now. So 20, so if you look at the, okay.
Can I correct that? Excuse me?
Doesn't that include the
Yeah, I think it
bottom
includes
of the boat?
boat.
Includes the bottom of the
Correct.
boat, yes. 7 inches at the bottom of the boat, yes. Sorry.
So,
That's 27, just to be clear.
Okay, you good, David? Okay. Paul?
Yeah, okay, a couple of questions. That information that just was provided, so the depth of the water at the end of the pier is 27?
It was 27 on one mean low water was 28 at the most recent one.
Okay.
And next door was checked as well, not to drag them into it, but we checked the water at that point, and it was the same within an inch.
Okay. The other question has to do with the shell fishing. So this is an area somewhere just off this proposed dock that the town seeds for shellfish, for recreational shell fishing. And where in this proposed dock doesn't in any way impede folks getting out into the water and shell fishing there, right? I mean, they still have access to this area where you're saying the shellfish are, which is 50 feet off of the shore. Is that correct?
Correct. I don't know where the town seated.
Yeah.
We have to do some more research on that, but there's access. We're not preventing any access along the shoreline.
Yes, okay.
People would fish foul and navigate could walk on, and then certainly walk right into the water and go deep, to that, say, 3 feet-ish.
Yeah.
Go shell fishing.
Okay. And my last comment is, it seems like you've done a lot of work with this. I'm not going to say anything more than that, but it seems like you've done an awful lot to try to conform to and follow the regulations.
Thank you.
I just want to bring up one thing. It seems like Waterways did not deny this project, but they didn't approve it either with about the shell fishing. And one of our regulations is not to do any shell fishing around up here in the dock. It's 5 foot around the areas, so you would impede your fishermen to a certain point. So just bringing that up, and also bringing a boat back and forth across this area, it's got to do some harm to the shellfish beds. There's no way that a prop does not cause some trouble, and that's just my opinion, and I think that that's one of the Waterways' concerns.
If I could respond to that, I don't disagree with what you said, but I'd like to respond. Just because I happen to be at the hearing, I don't know if you've ever been in that hearing room, but it's very small, and the shell fishermen were very interested in it, and the room was just full of people, and I actually couldn't tell who was on the board and who the shell fishermen were. But after we came back with the 42-foot proposal, there was literally, in my view, a relatively young man standing in the doorway, and he said, if it's 42 feet, I'm fine with that. So the impact that the dock, I think, the concern of the shellfishermen was extending farther out because they kind of go through that. It's not an embayment, but the shore is kind of concave, and they go in that area offshore. So I would suggest to you that the shellfishermen were satisfied with that part. The Waterways Committee said they were satisfied with the length. They did express concerns with the shellfish. But with regard to that, the 5-foot around, what I would respectfully submit to you is that when you are determining whether to approve or deny something, it's not whether there will be some harm. The issue is whether there will be an adverse effect. And when you determine what an adverse effect is, the definition has another sentence that says if it's a negligible effect, it's one that's small enough to be disregarded. And I would argue that the 5 feet around the pier is an effect, but I would argue that it's negligible because we're talking about a very large area that the shellfishermen are accessing. So they can go in and around the area of the pier. So I would argue that it's not a significant adverse effect.
Can I ask another question, please? So you went to Waterways, and I think you did reference natural resources. Now, the natural resources have to be the folks that seed that area and kind of maintain that area for shellfish fishing purposes. Did you talk to them about that area and whether or not the dock would in any way affect their maintenance of this recreational area?
We did not talk directly with them, but my understanding of who was on the committee, and when I saw them, the harbor master is there, and the shellfish constable is there. She participated, in all the meetings, and had numerous comments to make. And Ellie was there too. She's on that committee too.
Yeah. Okay.
One thing I may add is that they were happy to not see the ramp off the pier to a float, and then a boat at the end of the float. So by removing that, it certainly doesn't have that obstruction that one would expect with a pier ramp and float. This is just the pier.
Yeah, that was specifically removed from the design to satisfy their concerns.
Okay, thanks.
Point of order, we don't want to get our Ellies mixed up.
Did I speak the wrong Ellie?
No, we just have two. Ellie Lawrence is on Waterways.
My mistake, but the Ellie that I did see at the Waterways, I knew she used to be on the commission.
Right.
So my
She's-
mistake.
She retired from,
Yeah, I have the benefit of coming here every now and then, so there's sometimes some gaps between when I have the pleasure of doing this.
Anybody else? Brittany, anything else?
I just wanted to clarify directly from the draft minutes from the Waterways Committee meeting that the Shellfish Constable was not present at the last meeting, although she did have a member of the board read her notes, and they reiterated concerns that DMF had about water depth and the potential for permanent impacts from boat propellers to have damage on and a boat resting at the bottom. And their official motion was to pass the project to conservation with no issues with navigation without making a recommendation, but they do have issues with the water depth and concerns about shellfish, which is a long motion, but that was the official motion.
Mr. Chairman, could I just clarify one thing too? That's the Shellfish Constable, we went to 10 hearings. I didn't go to
Yes,
all
at the
10.
one where this motion was made.
Yeah, she was not present, but she had texted, I think, the chairman.
Yeah, someone read
At a
her.
lengthy, he went on for over 5 minutes reading it. And what I wanted to clarify was that the DMF comments, the reference to that was to the letter that the DMF wrote in response to the 80-foot dock.
no, 120
or 120. Oh, the 120-foot dock, yeah.
116 to clarify.
The comments were not related to this dock because when we refiled this notice of intent for the 42-foot, we had to re-notify DMF, and we have a new letter now. It's not very much different, but I just wanted to clarify that, those comments were in regard to a prior letter.
But the comments do remain. The letter still has concerns about prop dredging and boat resting at the bottom.
Here's something.
And I just wanted to clarify that they include a time of year restriction from April 1 to June 15th, if the board recommends. That's all I have. Thank you.
Oh, sorry. Sometimes we have trouble hearing down this end, this far end of the table here, but anyway. In a note here, Brittany, it talks about the fact that the pre-existing dock was not grandfathered. I don't know if you just commented on that.
Yeah, so
New
Attorney
construction
Wall,
must meet regs to greatest extent.
yeah, he went into that a little bit. Existing structures that are permitted may be reconstructed to the great extent practicable, and if they're reconstructed, they must meet the regulations as,
It must be what?
they must meet the regulations to the best extent
Yeah.
practicable.
So the fact that it was not grandfathered, not permitted, doesn't have a bearing on...
I don't believe that the fact that a dock previously existed there should have an impact on the decision that the commission makes, because we have regulations that require conformance to the great extent practicable,
Right.
which is as close to 100% as possible, and it's always up to the discretion of the board whether or not to grant variances or not.
I gotcha. Okay, thank you.
And if I may, Mr. Chairman, I do want to jump in at that point. 21 talks about legal docks that were destroyed by natural causes, and it talks about reconstruction.
Those are permitted docks.
Right, 22 talks about existing permitted structures, but then has a parenthetical and describes several instances of that, including, I don't have my
Yeah, so-
glasses on, but let me just read from my thing. If you look at the parenthetical, which is a phrase that modifies the term existing permitted structures, one of them is for which construction predates the promulgation of the regulations. And that's what we're hanging our hat on, is that this dock predates the regulations.
Yes.
And therefore, we are allowed to make the case that it can be reconstructed or improved, because Mr. Bauer asked me about the size. We can file a permit for an improved dock as long as we demonstrate to you that we've complied to the greatest extent practicable.
Anybody else? Anybody in the audience who would like to make a comment on this?
Good evening, Rick Bishop, Yarmouth Fort. And I would ask the commission to not approve this application this evening. Without question, in my opinion, the single most important regulation that you work under is minimum depth within the application period. There's no question in my mind at 20 inches that dock and boat would significantly damage the bottom of the waterways area. Prop dredging can reveal a few inches to a few feet of damage to the bottom, and I think this is an extremely important item for you to consider. Again, I recommend you not approve this for this single most important point. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bishop. Anybody else? Anybody on Zoom? Is there any further?
Can we have a clarification?
I'm sorry, Wayne?
Yeah, can we have a clarification? The person who just spoke was thinking 20 inches, he mentioned 20, and it's 27 inches to 29 inches at that point. We show a 7-inch draft on a boat that was suggested to us to show on that, so there's really 27 to 29 inches. I just want to make that point clear.
Okay, thank you. Is there any further discussion among the board? Jack?
What kind of, you have a motorized boat?
The applicant doesn't currently own a boat, but what he would like to put there is something of a very shallow draft, like a Boston whaler or a Carolina skiff. Again, I heard a comment about what level is the outdrive. When a boater is approaching a dock to dock, they do so at navigation speed, which is very, very slow, and they don't want their prop to hit the bottom because it can become damaged. So there's kind of a self-regulating interest for the boater to not be under very significant power when they're coming into the dock.
Okay, any further discussion? If not, would somebody like to make a motion to approve the project with special conditions?
So moved.
Paul, is there a second?
I'll second.
Roll call.
Don't you worry, I remember. All right, Paul?
A vote?
Oh, yes. Pat?
Nay.
Jack?
Nay.
Nay? Bradford?
Nay.
David?
Nay.
Chair votes nay. Does not carry. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's see, we are,
Are you still okay?
um,
6:07.
how fast will the first
We
request?
we can try for speed.
So, what are we talking about here? Are we going to do 2 minutes or are we going to do 15?
Got some comments, but
I better go. I'm sorry.
that's okay.
All right, Paul, I'm sorry, I didn't get you too far here. So everybody, I'm going to have to leave the meeting. I've got another commitment in another town, so I'm headed out. And I will be turning the chairman responsibilities over to Paul Huggins, which is the other end of the table here. Everybody, good luck. Coming down here, or are you there? Yeah, okay.
Come on over.
We'll see everybody.
See you later.
This over here.
Sorry, Dan, I made this agenda in hopes to have you first, but everybody had special requests.
Not a problem.
I thought he'd get farther along, you know. Just to change the format just a tiny bit. Again, thank you all for coming tonight. What I like to do when I fill in for Ed is to hear the presentation and then direct the conversation to Brittany. She'll make comments and express concerns relative to our responsibilities, and then turn it over to the commission for questions and then a vote, of course, okay? So if we can proceed, that's fine. The next, are we at,
Number 2.
where are we, number 2, SC 83-1165, Yarmouth Shore Condo Association.
Mr. Chairman, this is David. I need to recuse myself from this.
Okay, no,
Okay,
we still have enough people to vote.
we do.
David is recused for this particular item. Okay, Dan?
Sure. Good evening, members of the commission. My name is Dan Ojala. I'm a land surveyor and also a civil engineer with Down Cape Engineering in Yarmouth Port, and helping the Yarmouth Shores condo out with permitting on the project. Many years ago, just after Hurricane Bob, actually, there was some pretty significant erosion, and they were permitted the ability to put up a revetment. That work was not done particularly well. The stones were much smaller than specified, and it's kind of failed over the years. So they actually hired us to redo a new wall, which we are in the process of when we discovered that the old wall wasn't closed out. And so Brittany asked us to put in a certificate of compliance request on that. It's a little bit of an interesting backstory in that there's been a few different permits on the property. My gut is we should punt on this until after in July, we're going to come back and redo this with a buffer on top, the 10-foot vegetated buffer. Or you could close it out, but it's up to the commission how you'd like to do it. But as we noted, the wall is failing, and the buffer is okay in some places, but in many places it's a little bit thinner than might have been suggested. The plan calls for beach grass up on the top. I believe there might have been some language somewhere else about 10 foot. They redid some landscaping much later in '04, and at that point they had a 4-foot bump out near one of the units, so they had 6 foot and 10 foot on the rest of it. I think where the consensus of this sounds like it's going is we should put a 10-foot buffer back at the top of the wall. We discussed that at the last meeting. And so I don't think it makes sense to put a buffer in right now before we redevelop the wall because it would be disturbed. So I don't know, whatever the commission's pleasure, but if we continued it for a couple of months till the other permitting irons out, might make sense, where then you could have a fresh set of conditions. But whatever the pleasure of the board is.
Thanks, Dan. I understand what you're saying. I don't think we'd make you plant anything new now. But there is only one part of this that would actually prevent us from having any sort of condition that requires a buffer, because it's currently taken up by a patio that was not permitted at I think this is Unit 6. So the patio here shown in the approved plans and the as-built plans from the other two permits that Danny had sent to me from your office, they show this patio in line with the edge of the house with 4-foot access around it, which would have provided some space for an additional 4 to 6 foot buffer. But now the patio extends all the way to the top of the revetment, which would prohibit any additional buffer from being planted when the new revetment is removed. So what I would recommend to the board is, in order to close out this COC and to move forward with the next one, we wouldn't need to require any new buffer planting, but I think that patio has to be brought back to the edge of the house so that new buffer planting will have space to be put in when the new revetment is built.
So I kind of missed that. One of the things that's interesting about this plan is that this wasn't exactly what was constructed, but the wall is where it is on the ground today. The house was just pulled back out of the V zone, I believe, but the wall, I think, is right where it was in 03, 04. So I can do an overlay of that for you, but it seems, and I know you said there had been some reconstruction a few years back. We could certainly talk offline about that, but it seemed to me that that line was pretty much right where it's been for many, many, many years. I don't know why exactly.
Yeah, so here's what the as-built plan from the oldest permit shows: the patio in line with the end of the house, and now it extends approximately 8 feet beyond the house toward the revetment, which would take up any space that would be used for buffer planting for the revetment, the new revetment.
Was that house rebuilt, though, and pulled back?
No, I don't think so.
That's what I think happened. This plan certainly, shows the house proud right up against where the patio is now, and the house isn't there now. I don't know what happened.
Either way, there's no space for a buffer now.
Right.
The patio is inhibiting the potential to have any sort of buffer at the top of the new revetment. And so I would recommend that it would need to be removed, at least part of the patio, to have enough space to have some buffer plantings in there. You can request a continuance. I know we have this on for another.
Yeah, I
July
think
3rd.
that is probably the safest thing to do would be to continue. I'll look at this with a microscope and find out just what happened, because and SE 83-1642 was many years later, and that called out a very carefully calculated buffer. So I want to find out if that was that one closed out?
And he had sent me that had been closed out, that allowed a 6-foot buffer in front of this unit instead of a 10-foot buffer.
Yeah,
and that's the as-built plan that shows the patio right in line with the house.
Yeah, but then I think what happened is the patio stayed where it was and the house moved back. But I'll get with you on that. Let's continue, and we'll get to the bottom of that, because it's land court land, and the things are where they are. So let me do a careful overlay. We'll figure that out, and then we'll decide whether we need to move the patio or not. If it's fair, it's fair. If it was illegal, for sure. If it was permitted, we'll probably look at doing some kind of a bigger buffer beside the patio and not as, or,
I can tell you that it was not permitted. We have no permitting on file for it.
yeah, well, okay, fair enough, but again, the SE 83-1642 appears to have,
Well, you'll do some research on it?
Yeah, I'll do some research on it, we'll overlay it, and, it's very hard to tell without an overlay of the two at the same scale, so I'll do that, and we'll get to the bottom of it.
Well, I think we'll need a motion to continue this. Is there a date that we want to continue this?
July 3rd, is that good?
Yeah, we'll be back for the other one, so it'd be a good time to go over both in some specificity.
Okay, so can I have a motion to continue this to July 3rd?
So moved.
Okay. Pardon me?
So moved.
Okay. Bradford made the motion, Jack seconded. Do we have to do this
Yeah.
individually, I believe? Pat?
Aye.
Jack?
Yes. Aye.
Bradford?
Aye.
I think David is recused, and I vote aye, so.
Thanks.
We'll do some overlays, and we'll figure this out one way or the other. Thank you
Thanks,
so
Dan.
much.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, moving right along. This is SC 83-2161, Paul Butler, 164 Driftwood Lane.
I can just go ahead and do
Karen,
this
how are you?
one, Karen. This is a continued request for certificate of compliance. There were some erosion issues previously that have since been remedied. Some native seed mix had been laid down, some stones, and irrigation. So I didn't upload the photos, but everything looks much better, and the erosion issue has been remedied, so I would recommend the board issue this certificate of compliance.
Okay, so we need a motion to vote on certificate of compliance.
To issue, yes.
So
You
moved.
me?
Second.
Okay, we have a second, a motion and a second. Getting a little rocky here, but we're making it. Pat?
Aye.
Jack?
Aye.
Aye.
Bradford, aye. I vote aye. David?
Aye.
Okay. Do we have to do anything else?
Thank
you for your Motion time, Mr. passes. Chairman.
Thank you.
Hey, thank you, Karen. Okay, next one.
Sign it.
The
Yeah,
continued
you
notice
do
of
need to
intent?
pass
Oh, I
that
have to
down
pass.
to sign, make sure it's,
Usually I sleep down that other end.
so you can hold on to that one, Bradford, and sign this next one.
Which one do you want?
Yeah, that one.
Driftwood.
Driftwood.
This one doesn't go down.
That's correct.
All right. Interrupting my rest. You got it? You good? So this is Driftwood. Okay. This one doesn't go down right now, does it?
Yeah, we gotta sign Driftwood.
Does this mean that it's continued?
You can read this one into the record. They've requested a continuance, so we'll have to just vote
Okay,
continuance.
we have to
and
vote on
same
that.
for
Okay,
both.
all right. The next one is SC 83-2477, Worsley Witten Group for the town of Yarmouth, 2020 South Street. So it was Smuggler's Beach, South Middle Beach, and Juden Way. Proposed beach management, including maintenance, raking, and sand fencing on the coastal beach and land subject to coastal storm flowage. This has been a request for a continuance. Do I have a motion
So moved.
to continue? Bradford made the motion.
Second.
Pat second. Pat?
Aye.
Jack?
Aye.
Bradford?
Aye.
I say aye. And David?
Aye.
Okay.
And that's to July 3rd.
You good?
Yes, same for the next one.
All right, the next one is SC 83-2479, Crawford Land Management for Will Rubenstein, Alicia's Pond, proposed treatment of invasive hydrilla through chemical and physical means in a great pond, And there's been a request for a continuance. Do I have a motion to that effect?
Aye.
Second.
Okay, Bradford and Jack, all right?
Aye.
I already voted aye.
You already voted no?
No, you didn't.
Okay, Bradford?
Aye.
Aye, I vote aye. David?
Aye.
Okay, motion passes for continuance until July 3rd. Okay?
Yes.
All right. Next is SC 832483, J.M. O'Reilly and Associates, for Dennis and Darcy McDonald, 25 Sagamore Road. Proposed raise and replace of a dwelling in land subject to coastal storm flowage, and after the fact filing for tree removal. Yes, sir.
Good evening, Commissioners. Bob Reedy, engineer with J.M. O'Reilly and Associates, here representing Dennis and Darcy McDonald, the owners of 24 Sagamore Road. They are in the audience tonight, so if you have any questions for them, I'm sure they'd be happy to answer those for you. We're here really for two things. We're filing a notice of intent primarily because of the proposed removal of the existing dwelling and replacement with the proposed dwelling, roughly in the same footprint. We're also here in order to address some tree removal that was unintentionally done without first being permitted by the commission, so we want to discuss both those things. First, I'll go through the proposed dwelling removal and replacement. As you can see, the lot is partially within a flood zone, so land subject to coastal storm flowage. There's no other wetland resources present on the site or near the site. As you can see from the topography, a portion of the lot does extend up above the base flood elevation of elevation 11. I know that the FEMA maps do show that the entire property is within the flood zone, but just wanted to note that despite the elevation difference that we're showing here, the building, both the existing and proposed house, are partially within the flood zone, therefore are within the flood zone for purposes of conservation and the state building code. In terms of what's proposed, the dwelling is roughly the same size in terms of square footage as the existing dwelling. It's sited in roughly the same footprint as the existing dwelling. We're not proposing any additional bedrooms, so after review with the health department, the existing septic system will remain as is and be connected to. We are proposing removal of the existing paved driveway and replacement with a gravel driveway that would be, roughly the same amount of square footage. It's a bit of a smaller footprint for the circle, but then there is a bit of a pull-off that's proposed, so no real change there either. There's an existing shed. I think it's actually already been removed, so I did include that on the existing condition plan for reference, and the applicant is proposing to put two new sheds in at either back corner of the property. I think that covers the proposed development. I'd be happy to answer questions on that. Regarding the trees, before we had provided any plans to the property owner, he contacted us and let us know that he had heard from the Conservation Department regarding some tree removal he had done recently, and essentially let us know, hey, I removed some trees. The Conservation Department let me know I wasn't supposed to do that. I did not realize I wasn't supposed to do that, but I'd like to obviously address it. After he let us know that, I reached out to Joe at Conservation and let him know that obviously we were in the process of developing plans for a proposed removal and replacement of the house, and asked him how he wanted us to proceed, and he essentially suggested that we move forward with a notice of intent where we address both things at the same time. So obviously the property owner wanted to deal with this immediately, but we felt that it would make more sense to kind of bring this to you all at the same time. In terms of mitigation, he's proposing one-to-one replacement of 5 of the 6 trees that were removed. The replacement trees that are proposed are 4 American hollies and 1 flowering dogwood. And for the 6th tree that was removed, he is proposing replacement with 2 native plantings of inkberry bushes. All of these plants were obviously taken from the Cape Cod Cooperative Extension approved planting list. I think there is flexibility as to the specific species if the commission has question about any of those. But in terms of the trees that were removed, we did ask the property owner for his best recollection of what was removed after the fact. Our understanding is that it was 2 pitch pine trees that were roughly 20 feet in height. It sounds as if they might not have been in very good health, and a lot of sap was coming out of the side of them. And then 4 oak trees that were roughly 25 feet in height, all of which were removed from the property. So again, as soon as he became aware of that, I think that a neighbor complained to the Conservation Department, who then contacted him, and I think his response was something to the extent of, I didn't know I was within wetland resources, I didn't know this was something I was supposed to ask for approval from, and it's certainly something I'd like to address now that I'm aware of that. I'd be happy to answer any questions that the commission has about either the proposed dwelling or the mitigation that's proposed, and let me know if there's anything else.
Whitney, some comments?
Sure, yeah, thank you. I just wanted to confirm that you're not proposing to bring any fill into the site?
No fill is proposed. We're not trying to pull ourselves out of the flood zone, and yeah, the house will be flood zone compliant.
And I don't see any dry wells proposed. Would you be open to adding the downspouts leading to dry wells to manage stormwater runoff for the roof?
Yes.
And lastly, for the trees, when you put trees on the plan, in general, we do need the size. And when we're replacing trees, we like to stick to the same species that was removed, if possible. Sometimes, obviously, people don't like planting pitch pines. They're terrible to plant. I get that. So for the pitch pines, I'm fine with the American hollies. But since we removed 6 canopy-size oaks, I would like to see some oaks going back in there, and at a minimum caliper size of 2 inches. So if you'd be willing to move the trees around a little bit to incorporate some oaks in there, and a little bit bigger, considering the size of the mature trees that were taken down on the site. And so I would recommend the commission consider either continuing this or approving contingent on a revised plan showing the discussed changes.
Does anyone have any questions?
Yes, actually. Excuse me. Would you mind just clarifying what you meant by the FEMA flood zones? I was a little confused. It sounded like you said the whole property was in flood zone, but then...
I just wanted to address it. Brittany actually called, and we talked about it a few weeks ago. The FEMA flood zone maps do show the entire property being within the flood zone and actually extend across the street, and that flood zone has a base flood elevation of 11. So the entire area is within a mapped FEMA flood zone. However, part of the property is elevated above elevation 11 based on just the natural topography of the site. So, essentially, for purposes of FEMA, because we're partially within the flood zone, the house is partially within the flood zone, we're in the flood zone. I think what Brittany had initially brought up is that if we were trying to make any sort of claim that we're not in the flood zone, that's something that would actually have to be filed and approved by FEMA in order for them to change their map showing that, essentially the house is not within the flood zone. But we're not trying to make that claim. We're not trying to say that we're outside the flood zone. We're simply just showing the elevations the way that we located them when we surveyed the property. So just wanted to explain the discrepancy more than anything.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and I spoke to the floodplain manager for the county, and she's on the Conservation Commission, her local town, and she just recommended that the board, if they make a motion to approve, they don't approve the flood zone as marked on the site plan, just because it hasn't been approved by FEMA. We have full faith in the surveying crew, but when the discrepancy is more than, 10, 20 feet, they don't like for us to approve the plan without it having been approved by FEMA. So we would just include that in our motion.
Thank you. Jack, anything? No? Pat?
Oh, no.
David on Zoom? He's all set, okay. So we need a motion to approve the plan with special conditions.
If I may, could I just address my clients quick to make sure they're okay with the tree request?
Yeah, and so you have 5 trees, and I think from the map at least, look like more than that were removed. Yeah, inclusion of dry wells, and increasing the amount of trees and the size of the trees to include oaks in your replacement. I would recommend at least 8 trees, or a mixture of trees and shrubs, equivalent to 8 trees.
Okay, so 8 trees in total, or a 2-to-1 ratio of trees to shrubs, is that?
Usually do 4-to-1.
4-to-1, okay. 8 trees. And we would want at least 4 of those to be oaks, and then the other 4 could be selected from the cooperative planting list.
So, just so I understand, thank you. Is that...
Why don't you come on up to the microphone, please?
So just so I understand, is that 4 shrubs to a tree? Is that what we're saying?
So just from, I know you had an account of 6 to 7 trees. It looks from the aerial image, it was about 8 trees. So in the flood zone, we usually ask for 1-to-1 replacement of trees. Since they're canopy-sized oaks, you can plant a 2-inch tree of a similar species or 4 shrubs for each tree. So for the pines, we don't really want, pitch pines don't transplant well. I don't really want you to plant pitch pines, so you can plant other trees that are similar or 4 shrubs.
And on the oaks, do they have to be oaks? Can they be a similar caliper tree or size tree?
I'd like some oaks. They don't have to all be oaks, but some oaks should go back.
Okay.
Maybe 2 or 3,
Yeah, okay. Yeah, oaks are
the best.
quite a difference.
Wildlife value.
Wildlife, like 10 times what any other
Okay.
tree.
Okay, so I guess we can have a, do we have a motion?
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay, can we have a motion, please?
I'll make a motion.
The motion would be to issue an order of conditions
With
Trees,
conditions having to do with
contingent on a revised
the
plan.
trees and dry wells, right?
Yeah, including revised trees, dry wells, and not approval of the floodplain line.
Okay,
Second?
okay, so Bradford, who made the motion?
I'll motion. Jack.
Bradford made the motion, Jack seconded.
Oh, did you ask David if he had any questions?
By me?
No,
You asked him.
I don't have any questions.
Okay.
Oh, okay. All right, Pat?
Aye.
Jack?
Aye.
Bradford?
Aye.
I vote aye. David?
Aye.
Okay, motion passes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. So we move on to SC 832484 BSC Group. From Mark and Julie Haley to Andrina Road, proposed raise and replace a dwelling in the buffer zone to a coastal bank.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. For the record, members, for the record, my name is Kieran Healy. I'm a land surveyor with the BSC Group. Tonight I'm representing Mark and Julie Haley of the trustees of the Haley Family Living Trust, who are the owners of the property at 2 Andrina Road. This property is currently improved with a single-family dwelling and a garage. The proposal is for the garage to remain and the single-family dwelling to be removed and replaced. What's unusual about this one is that the majority of the new building is outside of the coastal resource areas, outside of the entire property is outside of the edge of the wetlands. A portion of the new building is within the 100-foot buffer to coastal bank, and the entire site is outside of the flood zone. So we're only talking about the northwesterly corner of the building that is to be removed. We're proposing a small addition in the resource area to the east of the property and a bulkhead that is to the north of the property. The septic system and the other site work is all outside of all coastal resource areas. But the other thing we're proposing to do is to remove 2 trees. One is a dead cedar tree that is to be replaced. It's actually to the right of that tree that we're looking at, that house tree. And in that area is highlighting right there. And then we are proposing to remove the 26-inch tree that is adjacent to the building. Currently, the roots of that would be disturbed when we dig out the foundation for the new house, and we just don't want to take a risk of something that size. It is just too close to the foundation to excavate down and set a new foundation without disturbing that tree. So we're proposing 3 more river birch trees on the east side of the property. It is outside of the buffer area. We just don't have the space in the buffer area to add additional trees. So we're proposing them on that. You'll notice that this house is pretty close to the street. It's only 15 feet from the street. So as a result, we don't have a lot of space between the house and the street to plant trees. This has been in front of the ZBA and has been approved for a raise and replace of the single-family dwelling. Other than that, I'd be glad to answer any questions you have, but again, the biggest thing here is that we're 123 feet to the wetlands, we're outside of the flood zone, and our closest coastal bank is 77.4 feet away, and that's to the existing house, where we're maintaining that same corner and not getting any closer to the resource area.
Okay, Brittany, you have some comments?
Thanks, Kieran. Would it be at all possible to move the house a couple of feet to save that tree, or you think it would be so damaged from the foundation construction that it's not even worth trying?
We looked at that, and the removal of the existing foundation is just too close. The part of the CBA filings is that you try and maintain that current footprint as close as you can. So that's kind of pigeonhole us into that corner.
Instead of moving further away from the street?
Correct, instead of moving further away from the tree.
Okay.
And there are a number of trees on the south side. They're not in the resource area, but they're in the south side, so we don't want to cut down other trees either to move the house to save one tree.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think a bird flying is going to know the difference between 70 feet from the wetland or 120 feet from the wetland, even though one is in the resource and one is outside the resource.
But they would tell the difference between an oak and a river birch.
Correct. I mean, we can't...
I'm not hating on river birch, but can you switch one or two of those to a mature size oak? Sorry, like a canopy size oaks, no, not a scrub oak.
I'm sure, yeah. My clients love river birch. They have them on their existing house, but we're glad to change one of those to an oak.
Thank you.
Anything else?
That's all.
Well, okay, I have a question. Karen, on the diagram here, where is that big tree that you're going to have?
It's just to the left of the bulkhead.
So it's not actually
It's not on here.
size plans.
Is it here?
It's the date of your plans.
Yeah, so Kieran submitted revised plans that didn't make it into the original packet, because I mentioned the tree to him after the packets went out.
You can see.
I apologize, I'm still having difficulty keeping up with the
Oh, I see,
county
I
Yarmouth
see.
tree regulation.
Yeah, because I was out there, and there's some amazing trees, but I just wanted to get an idea of, okay, that's all I wanted to know, so I could read this properly.
It's substantial, it's 26 inches, it is substantial.
Bradford, any questions?
Not a question, but I will echo Brittany's request to replace at least one of those river birches with the oak.
And I can do it with the one that's closest to the wetland, that's the most beneficial, I believe, where the cedar is right now.
Oh, sorry, what cedar is? I thought all three of these were proposed river birch.
Yep. If you go to the large one that we're removing.
Oh, here?
That one, yes.
Sure.
We can make that the oak.
Okay. Bradford, all set?
Yep.
Jack, any questions? Nope. Pat?
No questions?
No questions. David?
Nope.
I guess no questions, okay. So we need a motion to approve, motion to approve the project with, are there any special conditions having to do with?
With special conditions, in addition to a plan revision showing an oak tree of at least 2 inches.
Okay, you got that?
Yes.
All right, everybody set with that? Okay, Pat?
Aye.
Okay, Jack?
Did we
Made
have
the
a-
motion?
Did we have a motion?
I'm going too fast. Okay.
I'll make the motion.
Bradford will make the motion. Don't be afraid to speak up and tell me,
I'm going to second it.
Second, Pat? Okay, all in, Pat?
Aye.
Jack? Aye. Bradford?
Aye.
I vote aye.
Aye.
David? He said.
Aye.
He said aye. Okay. I guess we're all set. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, members.
Thank you.
Okay. Next is the notice of intent. It's a SC 83 2481, 1129 Great Island Road. Where are we here? Schofield Brothers of Cape Cod for Henry and Nicholas Kasdan, 1129 Great Island Road, proposed new dwelling and guest house in the buffer zone to a coastal bank and vegetative wetland with stairs to a coastal beach and velocity, flood zone, and coastal bank. Thank you. Welcome.
Welcome. Thank you. Thank you. For the record, my name is Laura Schofield. I'm from Schofield Brothers, and I'm here to represent the applicants and property owners, that is the Kasdan family. And this project is at their 1129 Great Island Road property. The project's the construction of a main house along with a guest house and construction of an elevated wooden stairway over a coastal bank to provide beach access. And in addition, those other usual appurtenances that go along with construction of a house, such as the driveway and the septic system. Currently, this is a vacant wooded lot, and the property fronts on Nantucket Sound. The property is long and rectangular in shape, and it's 2.7 acres in size. There are coastal and inland resource areas impacting this property. We have a coastal beach that's associated with Nantucket Sound. There's a distinct coastal bank, landward of the coastal beach, and we also have land subject to coastal storm flowage, a VE zone that falls on the face of the coastal bank. The coastal bank is the most landward coastal resource area, and so we've drawn our buffer zones from that. On my plan, I've just added a little bit of color to try and define what's going on out here, because there's lots of lines on the plan. Afraid to move this, but so basically this is the most landward resource area, which is the top of the coastal bank, and this is our 50-foot buffer and our 100-foot buffer, which comes along like that. There are also inland resource areas impacting this site. There's a small pond that has a little pocket and fringe of wooded swamp on the southeast corner. This wetland resource area falls on the property to the north, but the buffer zones impact and overlay our property. So those buffer zones are right here. This is the 50-foot buffer. Buffer to the BVW on the northerly property. There's also a floodplain associated with the northerly wetland resource areas. This is another V zone, and it's drawn in purple right here. Additionally, the orange line on the plan that I've drawn on here, just for illustrative purposes, is natural heritage priority. It's priority habitat 211, and that habitat pretty much follows the buffer zone to the BVW and the pond. We're still waiting to hear back from Natural Heritage, so we know we'll be continuing this project tonight, but we just wanted to have a chance to present the project to the commission and take back any feedback or input that you have, and just take the opportunity to introduce you to the project. One more wetland issue with the pond. The pond shows up on the natural heritage mapping as a potential vernal pool, and so your regulations require that it has to be investigated to make sure that it's not actual vernal pool habitat. Institutional neighborhood knowledge said that there's always been fish in that pond. So the pond was investigated for the presence of fish, and lo and behold, there they were. A golden shiner population was found in the pond, and so that information was provided in the notice of intent. And with the presence of a fish population, that would rule out the pond as being considered vernal pool habitat. So portions of the main house and the guest house fall within the 100-foot buffer zones to the resource areas. And we're also proposing the elevated stairway to the beach. So I think I'll start with that. The proposed stairway is located in the southeast corner of the property, right over here. And that's because the bank to the north of that has experienced some erosion, and that little corner of the property is protected from the existing jetties, and the bottom of the stairway can be well above the mean high water elevation, and there's also already a path that leads out to the edge of the coastal bank, so there's no clearing of any of the native vegetation that occurs along the top of the bank. So that seems to be an ideal spot to put the to put the stairway. It's just a typical elevated stairway providing access over the bank to the beach. And as an aside, before the July 3rd hearing, we'll be providing the commission with a little bit more information on that stairway, just a few details of construction and such. So the house and the guest house were situated on the property to comply with the Great Island Zone of Influence. That's something that was left over when the subdivision was created, which requires the structures on the property to be in a specific footprint rather than spread out all over the property. So that's partially how these structures were situated on the lot. The main house has been set back from the top of the coastal bank, so the house is almost entirely outside of the buffer zone to the top of the coastal bank. We have approximately 36 square feet of a patio in the outer fringes of that buffer zone, and there's some temporary grading that will go on for the construction of the house, and then once construction is complete, that area will be tucked back in and naturally vegetated. And so I just colored in on the plan the portions of the main house that are either within the buffer zone to the coastal bank or the buffer zone to the pond area. And as you can see, with respect to the house, we have this corner right here that falls within the buffer zone to the pond, and there's a screened porch and also a little bit of deck area that falls within the buffer zone to the pond area, and the rest of the house is outside of the buffer zones to the resource areas here. The guest house is within the buffer zone to the pond area. It's 60 feet at the closest corner of the house. There's approximately 802 square feet of the house is inside the buffer zone. There's 284 square feet of the post-supported porch, and then some other items such as the bulkhead, the deck, and some walkways. Most of the driveway is outside of the 100-foot buffer. There's a small little rounding, it's like 30 square feet that ends up inside the 100-foot buffer. Otherwise, the entire driveway's been located outside of the 100-foot buffer zone. And so when you add up the structures that'll be permanent structures, such as the house, the decks, and the porches, that'll occupy about 6% of the buffer zone that exists on the site, whether it's the combined buffer zone to the resource, coastal and inland resource areas. The erosion control's been provided on the plan. That's drawn in pink. We will have dry wells to handle all of the roof runoff, and there will be minimal grading around the house to once the foundations are in, the final grading will pretty much mimic the grade that's there now. There's no filling going on. The house will have a full foundation, as will the guest house. The porches and decks will be pile or post supported. And so within the buffer zone, there will be 19 trees removed for a total calculation of 202 caliper inches. Mary LeBlanc is the landscape architect of the project, and she would probably prefer to be here with us tonight, but she's home with a terrible case of COVID. So I'll present her piece of this as best I can. So Mary's calculated that there's going to be 202 caliper inches of trees being removed from the buffer zone to facilitate this project. And she's proposing 21 trees as mitigation, which translates into 77 caliper inches, and to provide the rest of the mitigation required under your local bylaw, that will be provided in an additional 140 caliper inches of shrubs and ground cover. And most of the trees that are coming out are oak trees, and most of the trees that are proposed are oak trees. So predominantly, the trees being replaced will be with oak trees. The details of the plantings are shown on Mary's landscape plan. The owners are interested in a sustainable, low-maintenance landscape focused on natives and wildlife habitat. So that's the project within the buffer zone. The remainder of the project is outside of the buffer zone. As I said, most of the driveway, which will be gravel, is outside of the buffer zone. All of the septic system and utilities are outside of the buffer zones. And once the septic system and the driveway is installed, this is outside of the buffer zones, but the plan is for the westerly portion of the property to be maintained as the woodland that it is now. And as I said, we know we'll have to continue to the July 3rd meeting, waiting for Natural Heritage to weigh in. And in my conversations with Brittany, I know she's expecting some additional information on the plans, and I just thought, well, I might as well just get any feedback or input from the commission tonight and give you one revised plan instead of a couple. So I'm happy to answer any questions that the commission might have.
Okay, Brittany, do you have any?
Yeah, like you said, we've been in touch. I've requested some additional information on the BVW forms, site plan details, including a profile of the stairs, including materials, elevations, adding mean high water to the plan, and some more details on the WPA Form 9 with reference to coastal impacts to the beach and or dune and or bank for the stairs. And that's all. Thank you.
Commission have any questions? Anybody? Guess not. David, do you have a question?
Oh, no.
Okay, thank you. Was this one of the properties, I know we visited this property, was it properly staked?
Yes.
There's a couple of one. Okay, thank you. And thank you for that presentation.
You're welcome.
And we'll need a motion to continue until July 3rd. Okay.
So moved.
Bradford made the motion. Seconded by Jack. Pat?
Aye.
Jack? Aye. Bradford? Aye. And David?
Aye.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. See you in July.
July.
Okay, the next, let's see. Okay, Buttercup, we're all set. Next is SC 83-2486, Hamlin Consulting for Christos Bonatis, 50 Heritage Drive. Proposed addition, garage, pool, rinse station, deck expansion, and septic upgrade within the riverfront area, and subject to coastal storm flowage and buffer zone to a bordering vegetated wetland. Thank you.
I understand, I'm sorry, Lynn Hamlin with Hamlin Consulting. Karen Healy's somewhere, he'll show up.
Pardon me?
Karen's here for this project as well, Karen Healy
Oh,
with
okay.
DSC. There is a deficit in our plan, and I think it's mistaken as well. So we are anticipating being required to continue, but we ask that you let us do an initial presentation so that if you have any other concerns, we can address them and have everything ready for the next hearing.
Okay, Brittany, is that acceptable?
It's up to the board. And would you mind scooting to that one? I don't think
Oh, I'm
that-
sorry, this one's not.
It just doesn't seem so.
Okay.
I gave you an extensive narrative. Oh yeah, that's much better, or louder. And you've had a long night. I will hit the highlights, and then if you want me to go back, and if you have questions, I will be more detailed. But I presume everybody's read the narrative.
I'm okay with anybody else?
I'm fine with it, yeah.
Good, Jack? All right, he nods, and yes, Pat?
It's the site that didn't have any staking.
We had some, just not all of it.
Okay.
It's been noted, right?
It's been noted, and we're sorry.
And David, are you okay with, okay, he's good. All right, thank you very much.
Right, thank you. So this project is as was described in the public notice. There is multiple overlapping resource areas on the property. There's 2 flood zones. There's a VE flood zone waterward of the construction. There's a AE flood zone up to contour 11. There is a coastal river, as indicated on the mouths of coastal river. So we delineated the riverfront at the mathematical mean high water in the inner and outer riparian area. And there's also a BVW which borders a salt marsh. It's your classic transition from salt marsh to BVW to upland to managed yard. So this project is pretty comprehensive. A lot of the work will be the interior improvements. Included with that is a second-story addition. There's a proposed garage addition with living space over. You can see the deck in the back of the property. That little jog that has a hot tub will be removed, and they'll be extending the elevated deck to connect to the proposed pool area. The pool area will be elevated, facing the base of the wall will be about 2.5 feet. We proposed your standard, it's what everybody requires now regarding the filtration and the disinfecting. I checked with Brittany. I've been checking with Brittany all along with this project because I was trying to bring you a project that you would be better received than if I hadn't spoken to her at all. I was told that you like to see the pool water drained into a drawdown pit if it has to be emptied for any reason, so we've included that in the design. The house has your traditional dry wells to handle roof runoff. The septic system will be upgraded. There's no increase in bedroom number, but the septic system will be upgraded. The 1,000-gallon septic tank will be switched to a 1,500-gallon septic tank. The SAS will be a leaching field elevated 5.4 feet above adjusted groundwater, which is a little better than what's required in Title V. We did the calculations for square foot disturbance in a buffer zone and applied your mitigation ratio. Your mitigation ratio for planting in a buffer zone is greater than the state's mitigation ratio for disturbance in the riverfront, so we went with, they overlap. So if you were out there, and I'm sure you were, there's a large backyard that now does not provide much in habitat. There's no wildlife corridors there. So a large portion of that backyard will be restored back with native woody species, primarily shrubs. It's very low back there, so we chose mostly facultative type shrubs. So depending upon what the water decides to do in any given year, they have the best chance for survival. We will monitor that for 3 years. The typical conditions I see are 3-year monitoring, 90% survival, but you'll accept whatever your traditional order is. I'm going to preempt a couple of things on this plan that I already discussed with Brittany. There's a path in the back that we've shown. It's really a path to nowhere, so that will be filled in again with more restoration plants. The cedar trees that we are showing as replacement for the cedar trees being removed for the garage and shed relocation. We're going to move those from the front of the property to somewhere in the buffer zone. Brittany suggested to the west of the pool. That looks like a good place to put them. We are removing 9 cedars, and we have 5 proposed. I can add back, we can discuss the trees if you'd like, and I can add back additional trees if you want in the mitigation area. I'll try to stay out of everybody's view corridors. I think I just wanted to hit the highlights, and I wanted to get your input, so if there's anything else that you have concerns about, I can address them at the next hearing.
So at this point in time, you're just asking for a continuance?
We will have to, I'm told, because it wasn't, the plan you didn't get the revised plan in time.
Yeah. So should we
I would,
discuss now?
yeah,
Discuss any questions now?
see if there's anything else that you'd like her to revise.
The only question I have, I guess, is the one about the trail in the back. It doesn't seem to be much of a trail, and you're going to put a 4-foot wide trail?
No, that's gone.
You're
We're going to put native plants there.
Oh, okay.
Okay. I think what happens is people typically want a 4-foot path. Oh, I'm sorry, am I interrupting somebody?
No, that's just David.
And it's just, it's like an automatic thing you put on people's plans to get to the water, but it's hard to get to the water there, so we're just going to remove that.
And the only other question, that has like a complete, I guess, beautiful sod lawn. Is that, a lot of that going to be taken up, and it's going to be...
You don't like sod lawns. He likes his sod lawn, but I don't think I can...
to mow it.
I don't think I can conform to your regulations without removing
I'm
the...
just asking about it, I know you'll do everything you need to do in terms of regulations. I just wanted to know about that lawn, because it's quite a lawn. Okay.
A lot of that lawn's going to be gone. And then what will happen is there'll be that much more buffer between will be maintained going forward in the resource area.
Okay, thank you. Bradford?
No questions.
Question, Pat?
I was just saying that due to the location, there won't be any irrigation or fertilization going down into the river in the back.
No.
Okay.
This buffer will, there is a net gain. I know it seems like a big construction project, but from an environmental point of view, not doing it and doing it, there's a net gain environmentally by allowing the project to go forward and getting this buffer zone in. Because the project itself is within lawn area, or it's up high on the property, and in exchange, you're getting a buffer zone where there's not really, there's a very narrow native or natural buffer zone.
Jack?
Can you tell me, in your knowledge or research, data that impact of draining the pool into these kind of dry wells? Or
My opinion's the opposite of what the standard thoughts are. I think that pools, the disinfecting chemical in pools is very, dissipates in air and light, and then we're directing it underground where it's dark and there's no air or light. But I think that, my opinion is all the drainage that we direct subsurfacely would be better off if it was drained either in a rain garden or in stone trenches, because then you have the air and light contributing to its breakdown. But that's something I gave up fighting about, because all the boards seem to want pool water and roof runoff and everything directed underground. But if you ask me my opinion, I think it should
so
be...
this is a regulation you're meeting by doing that?
I just want to clarify, yeah, so as a part of our standard special conditions, whenever there's a pool, we do require that the pool water sit for a certain amount of time. I can pull it up, but I'd have to navigate through all my files before it goes into the drawdown pit. So it's not fully chlorinated when it gets in there.
Well, you're ahead of the rest of them. because usually they just want everything directed underground.
Brittany, can we ask that they be, consider some kind of other method than just putting it right down?
I guess if we use the county
Amherst
Amherst regulation of leaving it,
So it is a town regulation.
town's regulation of leaving it alone before we pump it into the drawdown.
Okay, that's what I'm,
That space is what's important.
Right.
Space of time.
Yeah, that's good. That's more than other towns do.
You can pull it up if you want.
Brittany, I think I skipped over you as far as some of your comments.
Yeah, so I'll just pull it up since I'm here. So here's the swimming pool. It needs to sit for a minimum of 3 days before draining. And all pool water where possible shall be drained through a dry well or drawdown pit.
Okay.
Pat mentioned my comment about no irrigation or fertilizer within the riverfront area. And the only other note that I had here is that there is some topping going on, and so it will be included that in a special condition that the mitigation area remain undisturbed, including any pre-existing trees, that topping may no longer occur. Unless they want to apply for vista pruning, but in that case, we wouldn't allow topping anyway, it would just be thinning.
So those will be things that will be part of special conditions upon the next hearing, right?
Yes, and it is quite difficult to see these trees. Can you make them black or red or bright?
I did that, and there were so many of them that I had a sea of red. So
Had
the
to undo
cedars
it.
are just
Okay.
they're very dense where you've been out there. Obviously, you've all been out there. They're quite close together.
Yeah.
I can make a different color and make them try and stand out a little bit clearer. But
Okay. I know it's really busy right here with the shed, so,
we were able to relocate the shed from our initial filing. When we staked it out, we realized that by twisting it basically 45 degrees, instead of removing 6 trees, we only had to remove 3 trees. So we relocated the revised plan that's on the screen shows that at an angle as opposed to being parallel to the property lines. So.
Can I work with you, Brittany, just to pick some trees, because I think you should put different trees there, rather than...
if it's a sea of cedars, that's
cedars.
fine.
I mean, I think you would have more wildlife benefit if we varied it up a little bit.
Sure.
So if I can just work with you on that, location and species?
Sure.
Okay, and then I'll have that plan to you in time before your next hearing.
Okay. David, did I ask you, do you have any comments?
Yeah, I have one comment and 2 questions. Brittany brought up the vista pruning, and I just want to make sure the owner knows, excuse me, you can't do vista pruning without talking to at least Brittany, if not others. My second one is, have you thought about doing a salt pool, a saltwater pool? I don't know what the runoff, what the
That's what it is.
draining is.
Okay.
That's what it is.
Okay. Okay. And third thing is, you just made me look smart, I appreciate it. The third thing is, it seems like the fence is very close to the wetland. And then, but what you're doing is putting in all that mitigation on this side of the, outside of the fence, am I right?
I think that, I forgot to mention it because I was trying to blow through it and I hold you up, that your regulations, and Brittany will correct me if I'm wrong, require the fence to be elevated 6 feet above grade for wildlife passage? 6 inches.
6
I'm
inches.
sorry, 6,
If it's a
6 feet,
stockade
6
fence,
inches.
yeah, so I think this fence,
The chain link fence, but we would just conform to whatever your regulations require regarding fence. There's a lot of coyotes there, and
I'm also realizing that the 35-foot buffer is not shown on the plan, which we usually use as a guide for where to prioritize mitigation plantings be located.
it is.
It is?
Yeah, no, it's a line. If you go to the right and work your way up, you get 100-foot riverfront, then 35-foot buffer zone.
Okay, I was on the wrong side.
Yeah, you're there. Oh, your little cursor was just on it. Go the other side.
Yeah, I saw it. I'm trying to follow it now. So it gets lost. Is this on this side? Okay, anyway, I think the fence should be brought out to the edge of the mitigation.
Yes, that's a good idea.
You all set? So we need a motion to continue to, is it July 3rd also?
July 3rd.
You don't have another hearing in June, or you're just too busy?
No, so June, our second meeting had to be canceled because of the federal holiday, Juneteenth, and the hearing room is booked every other day.
Is there, I understand that the plan came in late. Is there any chance that we could go forward and discuss it, potentially because there's a change in the flood zone and Massachusetts Building Code on July 1st, and if we don't file with the building department before July 1st, it would mean we have to elevate the house that's there by 2 feet. So I realize the plan came in a little bit late, but if there was any way we could discuss it, and I mean, as we can definitely modify the plan to reflect the trees that we discussed. I think the board in general is in agreement with the project, not to put words in your mouth, but I haven't heard anything negative other than working with Brittany to get some solutions to a few of the issues that we've talked about. But I only ask because the June 19th meeting is not on because of Juneteenth, and July 3rd is after that building department deadline of the new Massachusetts version 10 building code going into effect.
Is there any way we can accommodate that you know?
This is more than one site plan revision. I mean, it's up to the commission, but this relocation of proposed trees, repurposing the number of trees, the types of trees, filling in the path, relocating the fence, it's a lot of items on a new plan. It's not just the plan that you gave us last week. So I'm not sure about that, but it would be up to the board because they would have to make sure they would just never see it again. It would be up to me.
And if we could discuss each one of those items for maybe just 2 minutes. I mean, the fence is one of the big items, and you know, it's made it clear that you'd like the fence at the edge of the mitigation area, and you know, we're agreeable to moving the fence to the edge of the mitigation. If the commission were good with that idea, I mean, that's moving it forward, you know, 20 feet in some areas and 40 feet in other areas away from the wetlands, so it's a substantial move to. You can see on the plans where the edge of the mitigation line is going. That's, you know, that's where the fence line would move to. So, I mean, we could discuss that tonight, you know.
Yeah, so, just so I understand, you know, sometimes, so, because of the changes that are coming, we're talking about approving the plan tonight with those, is that what I'm understanding?
That's basically what I'm requesting, but as I say, there's 4 large items that we need to discuss. If I could go over to the screen and just, you know, discuss each one of them, I think the board could feel comfortable potentially going forward tonight with those. So, like, as I mentioned, the first one is the fence.
So, I mean, we can't look at the fence yet because the mitigation area might change with the addition of new trees and/or shrubs to compensate for the, right? Aren't you going to rework?
Even if I wouldn't put the fence around the trees. I would put the trees would be outside the fence. Because I'm going to run the trees, like you suggested, up that westerly property line, and I wouldn't make my fence weave around trees, just around the big general mitigation area, and then you put the trees naturally within the buffer zone within the lawn. Is there a way you can sign off on the building permit, Brittany, without an app? You have to actually have that's what I'm just trying to figure out a way to.
Yeah, I can't sign off on the building permit before an order of conditions is issued. What is this dark spotted line? Sorry.
I think that's the V zone.
Why is this gap here?
There's already planting in that area.
Oh, that gap, that's that big cedar grove, and I didn't want to cheat and put plants
We
where
didn't want to
plants
count it
were.
twice. It's already there. So basically what we're talking about is carrying the fence along this line right here,
Yeah.
filling this in, which is the pathway,
Yeah.
running the fence down to here, and then putting some of the trees along this side right here.
Yes.
So
Okay.
2 of the items were getting rid of the path and the fence relocation. And the trees we talked about is opposed to having the trees in this area right here, which is very close to the property line, we realize, but we're looking for a space to put
And
them.
more and additional trees.
And additional trees in this area right
Or
down here.
shrubs to account.
Right, but you and I can work that out. I mean, I think.
I also have to comment on an abutter comment that we received that I haven't had the chance to bring up yet. So this abutter is the immediate abutter to the north, and she's primarily concerned with her view shed, which is not in our purview, but an additional concern, she cites a great horned owl in the cedar grove, I think up in this location, but it would be of note if we could possibly preserve that single tree and or get confirmation of which tree it is. But yeah, I guess.
So there's an owl up in the great horned owl, you said?
It's in the fall and the winter. It's right against the fence.
Okay, and what is the request? I'm sorry.
If it's right up against the fence, I don't think any of those trees are going anywhere, right?
Yeah, that's it exactly. That's why when we moved the shed, two of these trees right here that were going to be removed, so by us twisting the shed, we're able to leave those trees where they are. And the other thing, as far as the view corridor goes, here's the existing building right here. So we're not modifying the back line because the house we're talking about is in this area, and they're looking down like this. So we're really not affecting that view. The house right here is pretty much along like this. Were there any other items?
Is that sufficient, or do you want to comment further on it, or are you all set?
Want to come up to the microphone if you wish? Yeah, you brought up, you're the abutter that brought up the situation about the owl, right?
Yeah, well, I just saw that picture. My mother bought our house 65 years ago, so.
Why don't you just go over to the...
Oh.
You want it?
That's what it looked like before, there was nothing, so, when you bought it. So, I've been visiting there most of my life, and now I live there for the last few years.
Excuse me one sec. Could you do me a favor and just go over to the microphone over there?
And I know that's what the majority of your comment letter was about, but unfortunately, the view corridor is outside the purview of the Conservation Commission, so I highlighted the Cornell part of your letter.
Yeah, okay.
So that was the most important for the board to reference. If you can, the large cedar where, right between the properties, is it over by the road? Is it over here?
No, it's next to the fence. It
Yeah.
touches the fence.
Okay, so if it touches the fence, I think it's remaining then.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. And then I mentioned to you, Brittany, that the plan was to plant tupelo trees. They would probably be right in my line of vision, and they're gigantic, and I would suggest that there could just be bushes there instead. But and you said I could work it out with Chris.
Yeah, so the planting plan would be approved, and the general location can be modified if needed of plants that go in, as long as they're in the general footprint of the mitigation area.
Yeah, okay, thanks.
Well, help me to understand where we are right now, Brittany.
The applicant is requesting that you approve this pending all of these revisions for my review and not continuing to July 3rd, so they don't have to comply with the new building code that goes into effect on July 1st.
We have the ability to do that, the authority to do that.
You can if you wish.
Okay, you can if you wish. Let's have a discussion with the commission. Pat?
I think we should do it if we can.
Okay, Jack? Yeah. Patrick?
I feel there's too many changes on this plan.
Okay. All right, David?
Excuse me, I don't have a problem if Brittany gets to look at it.
Okay, thank you. I don't have a problem with it. I think we work with these folks quite well, as long as we're comfortable.
Legal, administrative, scheduling, all the way, the deadlines for closing, are we within the requirements?
Yeah, I have 21 days to issue, so the latest I get it to you, you would still have time for me to approve the building permit, but then they would have to issue it before.
No, it just needs to be applied for.
It just needs, okay.
Yeah, it locks it in.
Oh, it just needs to be applied for? You can apply for it.
But
I
you
just
need
can't
to sign
approve
off.
it.
You need to sign off on the application.
But that would be me approving it.
I don't know, do you have to have conservation sign off to file?
Yes.
Not to file. It comes right into my inbox in OpenGov.
Right, but would you sign it? If you're not happy, if it has to come back in front of the board, you don't have the ability to sign.
But it has been applied for at that point already.
Yeah, but all of the departments have to have.
Okay,
you know,
so it has to be approved then.
approved by everybody but the building department themselves, just to clarify, is my understanding.
Well, I think that this is something where we have to get your recommendation.
Can I speak?
Yes, 1 second, please. Okay, absolutely. Because, you know, the main thing is, I want to make sure that nobody gets in trouble, and nobody gets, you know, delayed, or whatever it may be. These are the intricacies of all of this stuff that are sometimes very confusing.
I fully understand that, you know, this is a lot to ask for, but if it was just one of these items, the board has in the past approved these situations. This one's a little unusual in there are 4 items, you know, so it's, but none of them are, for lack of a better term, substantial. We're in agreement. I've showed you what we plan to do to comply with the town, so I think in this particular case, I don't think we're looking for something that could be questioned outside of this meeting that's not acceptable to the board.
Yeah, okay. Brittany, you have any other thoughts?
I think it's a lot for me to review on my own, but
sorry,
I'm
say
fine.
again?
If the board is okay with it, I'll review it, and it better be the best mitigation planting I've ever seen.
Ma'am, I'm sorry. You can go to the microphone, please, and identify yourself.
Hi, Brittany. Hello, everyone, board. Thank you. My name is Nicoleta Cunadas. I'm Crystal Cunadas' wife. Sorry, I'm so loud, I probably don't need the mic. I just wanted to assure you, Brittany, we've been working very close with Lynn. We love Cape Cod. I'm so grateful to live here. Everything that you recommend, we're more than happy to put in that location, wherever it is that you want us to put, whatever types of shrubs and trees. I mean, we just want to make it as beautiful as we possibly can, so we can one day leave it to these 2 cuties. So I just want to assure you and give you our word and Lynn's word that, you know, anything that you want us to put there and plant, we're more than happy to do that, and we'll take beautiful care of the property. Thank you.
Thank you. And I know it would be a significant cost, but the new building code is there for owners. It is a benefit to have your home comply with the newest building code. It might seem costly and crazy up front, but it would eventually be a benefit. That being said, I'm fine to review this plan if the board continues to approve it.
Okay, so I would like to second that Brittany's caution, because when things get bad in 5 years, 10, 20 years, you'll look back and say, geez.
We are putting in some flood zone mitigation here. We are putting in flood vents. We are, you know, doing certain items and relocating items that are within the flood zone today. It's just the elevation of the building is the one thing that we're looking to avoid.
And that storm comes and...
Well, it complies with the current regulations, and it complies with FEMA. It's the mass building code that's the additional 2 feet of freeboard that we're looking at.
Someone would make a motion for something.
Pardon me?
Can someone make a motion for something? I think we've discussed to
Going to make a motion. Well, I guess we're going to we need a motion to approve the project with special conditions, namely all of those things that we just talked about, okay?
Contingent upon a revised plan.
And contingent upon a revised plan. Any other elements of it we need to have? Okay, and we're safe with this. Okay, well.
If this holiday wasn't coming up, if it wasn't the holiday next week, I mean, in 2 weeks, we wouldn't have this problem.
Yeah,
They wouldn't have it.
Right.
I'll make that motion.
Okay.
And I have confidence in Brittany.
Okay, so do I. Can I have a second?
Second.
Second, Pat?
Aye.
Aye. Bradford?
Nay.
I'll vote aye. David?
Nay.
Okay, so it's 3-2, the motion carries. Okay. And good luck to everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. We appreciate it.
Okay, the next, let's see, what do we have next? I have to pass this down. This is Great Island.
Great Island doesn't get signed,
Doesn't get signed.
so that's good. Great Island is continued.
Brittany, do I have to come in, Brittany, and sign everything when I'm better?
I'll let you know. I don't think so.
Okay,
Doesn't have
I
to
hope
be
I get
signed.
better.
Harrison Drive.
Yes, please sign, and even if you voted no, I need 4 signatures on that one.
But I should still sign.
Yeah.
Okay, so where are we?
Actually, I only need 3, but so one of you needs to
goodness.
sign. Yeah,
Who is that for?
Yeah, so I don't sign.
yeah.
So we're in other business now, right? Is that where we're at?
We are.
Okay.
We don't take public comment. What is your concern? Okay.
This is something that was on the docket. It was on the docket.
Oh. So they requested an earlier hearing because they had a scheduling conflict, so that had been denied prior. It's been denied. It didn't meet all of the regulations. They didn't have sufficient depth at the end of their dock.
We thought that they said that the fees to be adopted.
Yeah, so you can review the minutes after they've been posted, but we do have to continue our meeting. Sorry. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, other business approval for May 15th, 2025.
They look good.
Anybody read them?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll approve them.
You read them, they're good?
Second.
Second. Pat?
Aye.
Jack?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. David?
Aye.
And term reappointments?
So they're both not here, but Ed and Ellie, both of their terms expire on June 30th, 2025, and they have both shown interest in being reappointed. We just need a vote to recommend that the select board reappoint both of them for an additional 3-year term each.
So could we vote for that?
Yes, you may.
Ellie and-
So Ellie and Ed both.
Oh.
Aye.
We need a motion to that effect, or just?
Yeah.
Okay.
Motion to that effect.
Do we have a motion to reappoint Ed and Ellie to the board for a new term?
Yes. I'll move.
I gave it to Pat and then Bradford.
Okay.
Okay.
Good.
And vote.
Aye.
Jack,
Voting?
you gonna vote?
Aye.
Aye.
Bradford?
Aye.
Aye. I'll vote aye.
Aye.
Aye, okay. Carried by a majority.
Guess we'll keep them.
Any updates?
Yeah, just our new fees are effective June 20th, 2025. They're linked, gave ample time, sent a blast email, so everyone knows. And then just another announcement, the Waste to Water will have their second public meeting on their waste to water assessment on June 10th at 6 p.m. in the hearing room. And there's an online survey and a website for you to put in all your thoughts about the waste to water, so please take that if you're interested.
Okay, anything else?
That is all.
Can I have a motion to adjourn?
Moved.
Second.
Pat?
Aye.
Jack?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. David?
Excuse me, aye. I apologize for my voice.
You're above and
Did
beyond
good.
the call of duty. Thank you. Meeting adjourned at 7:29 p.m.
Long one.
Bye, everybody.
Bye,
Go
David.
to
Feel
bed.
better.
Feel better.
Good idea.
What a bummer getting that stuff.
Recording stopped.
Seems like there's a lot of this COVID